Hello, everyone. Welcome to Driver Suit Blog Radio, the first edition of this podcast. And I already had an episode that I was going to upload. In fact, actually, I did upload it. But I decided to go with a brand new one because A, I got a new camera setup that I think works better. And B, there have been some newsworthy events that have happened in recent months that I just have to talk about. So we're not going to do a memorabilia thing. I'm going to drone on for a while. But yeah, okay, we got to discuss some things that have happened in various aspects of racing. Let's get to Formula One first. Now, apparently, Formula One starting next year is going to be having, from what I understand, 2 races in the United States. There's just one small problem. Formula One is never going to be entrenched in the United States. It's never going to happen. And there are various reasons why, but I can sum it up for you very simply. Formula One is very Eurocentric. Americans are American-centric. You're never going to be able to carve out that piece that you want. I'm sorry. Try all you want, it's never going to happen. But at one point, there were 3 races in America on the Formula One calendar in a season, except during the auto racing boom of the mid to late 1990s, so about 94, 95 to 2000, when there was more money, better television deals, and more tickets sold to racing than at any other point in history, Formula One was nowhere to be found in the United States of America, so they missed their big chance to entrench themselves. And it's not like they haven't tried in the past, because they've tried 8 separate venues, ranging from established road courses like Watkins Glen to street courses like that abominable Phoenix one. Seriously, go watch the race on YouTube. It's not a good race. And then they even had a race in a casino parking lot. Classy. And every single one of those events never was able to recreate what they had in other countries like England, Japan, Germany, Italy. So I'm going to ask a logical question here when it comes to Formula One expansion. Wouldn't you put a second race where you have a dominant fan base? Like, if I was going to put a race in a second track in a single country, then the most 2 obvious ones are Italy and England. Huge fan bases, very, very devoted, very, very passionate, very, very thirsty for races. Going to get huge TV ratings, going to get huge draws at the box office. Why wouldn't you do that? You're gambling on a region that will never accept you when you can go to your established regions and make more money. I mean, I don't get that. You're never going to be the dominant force here. I'm sorry. Now, there's also another issue with Formula One, and that was the utter disaster of a Belgian Grand Prix. I don't get embarrassed to be an auto racing fan all that often, but here we are. What the hell happened? How do you call that embarrassment a race? And for those of you who are living under a rock and don't know what I'm talking about, in essence, what happened with the Belgian Grand Prix is the weather was a little, I don't even say little, it was a torrential downpour. So what do? There are plenty of options. Do you try to wait out the rain for a few hours? Do you postpone the race till another day? Formula One right now on their calendar has a race scheduled for like the 3rd week in October. There's no venue that has been announced. There is no race name that's been announced. All we know for a fact is they're going to try and hold a race, but they don't have a venue. What sense does that make? And if you're going to do that, why don't you just have the race that you couldn't have live at that to be announced venue? I think all races should have a specific venue for rained out races. I mean, it's just say, hey, we're gonna take a, I don't know, June 22nd. It's going to be an emergency day, and if we have to have a race postponed, that we can't run the whole thing, we're going to move it to that date. But it again doesn't make any sense. So rather than cancel the race, rather than move the race, rather than try and wait out the rain, here's what these idiots did. They had the parade lap, or the formation lap, or whatever you want to call it. And then they had the first lap of the race, and then they brought the cars down into the garage area. They waited for 3 hours, and then it looked like at one point they were going to be able to have at least part of the race. But no, the weather closed, and so after like 3.5 hours, one lap was the total length of the race. Let me throw out a few numbers for you. 70,000. That is the number of people who can attend the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. And with tickets going as much as 10,000 American dollars, you can imagine how pissed they were. 87.4 million. That's the number of people, by Formula One's own admission, that watch the races on a weekly basis. Not on a regular basis, not a weekly basis, I'm sorry. 100. That's the percentage of people who were pissed at the way that this race was handled. I've never seen anyone unite against one specific group of people in a sport like the fans have. The fans, the drivers, the teams, the manufacturers, the sponsors, they all left that track mad as all hell, and I can't blame them. And if you're watching it live in the United States, you got to get up at like 8 o'clock in the morning Central Time to watch this. By the time that they called the race, it would have been lunchtime. It was just, if you can't hold the race, don't start the race. I mean, it's one thing if you're like a third of the way through the race and then bad weather comes in the area. Okay, that sucks, but it happens. But if you know that the race is not going to be held to the fullest extent, you know the track conditions are dangerous, because watch the footage. I don't think it ever stopped raining at any point during the telecast. And this is the kind of shit that killed Jules Bianchi a few years ago. If you remember that debacle, where again the track was not raceable, but they had the race anyway because they had to screw over the people just to make money. I don't even know. But even then, that's not a fair comparison, because at least they got a full race. Granted, Jules Bianchi did die, but this one we got one lap. So it's getting sort of hard to be an open wheel fan in America. You've got Formula One grasping at straws, trying to salvage something that is unsalvageable. You've got Formula One holding bad races just to make money. There was no other legitimate reason why they started the race. They knew they'd have to give refunds to everyone if they didn't, or rain checks. They didn't want to do that, so they just decided, we're going to screw the fans. Now, they might not have said that, but that's what ended up happening. And it's also difficult to be an open wheel fan with what's going on in IndyCar. Could someone please explain what the hell was going on with the Music City Grand Prix? I mean, I could understand if this was proposed last year and it came into existence this year, and things weren't ready, and everything that happened. But this has been in the pipeline since at least 2015. You'd think between then and now, somebody would have gone, looked at the track setup, thought to themselves, this is not a good setup, we need to make improvements. But that isn't what happened. Between qualifying, practice, and the race itself, there were a total of 8 red flags. Now, if that's not a record, I'd like someone to tell me what the record is. 8 red flags because A, the track was so bumpy it was almost impossible to hold onto the steering wheel, if you can imagine that. And B, there was, I think, at least one turn, I think there might have been more, where you had to be dead solid perfect coming out of that turn. Because if you weren't, like if you were a few inches off either way, you're hitting a concrete wall. The problem is, this is a race course for race cars. Race cars tend to race each other. That's the point. Now, not only do you have a corner that's narrow to begin with, but you have just enough room for one car. Why not have a setup where you can have enough room for 2 cars, or at least not have a corner where you need to be perfect every single time? Because it was embarrassing. And I'm going to give a little bit of slack to IndyCar because say what you want about Nashville, it was still a new course. So I think they're going to iron out some of the issues. I hope they iron out the issues. But if they don't, I don't know. And again, I like open wheel racing, but there are times it is just, I can't defend it. They do stuff that makes no sense, and I'm not going to try and defend it. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll talk about NASCAR on the other end. I'll be right back. Okay, I am back from the break. I needed to calm myself down a little bit because I really didn't want to go off on a screaming match. But now we're going to talk about some of the things that are going on in NASCAR. I like that they're not adjusting the playoff formats anymore. I like the round. I like the elimination rounds. I think it keeps it guarantees there's going to be 4 drivers in the championship final. You don't know who's going to win till the very end. I never liked watching NASCAR back in the old days, where Jeff Gordon would be the champion with 3 races to go. So there's really not much of a point to watching the 3 races, other than just to see who wins. But they released the schedule. I think it was last week. And I was actually seeing if they were going to try this, because I didn't think they could be this stupid, but they are. So they're debuting the new 7th generation car starting next year. I don't like the fact that the door numbers have been moved forward. I granted it does give more space for advertisers, but it just looks weird. So I'm going to have to get used to it. I'm going to try and get used to it over the break, but I'm not sure that I can. But it's a new design car. They want to freshen up the sport. Okay, fine. Could someone explain to me the point of having the Clash at the LA Coliseum? Could someone explain this to me? I'm sitting here racking my brain trying to understand why they would do something like this. Don't have it at an actual track where you could get data for the brand new cars that you haven't tried out yet. No, don't do that. Have the teams travel from North Carolina to Los Angeles for basically a miniature all-star race. And then have them drive back to North Carolina, and then 10 days later they have to go down to Daytona for Daytona 500 qualifying. Why not just have the Clash in Daytona? Let the teams test, because all the teams are going to need the test. This is a brand new setup, brand new car, brand new wheels, brand new everything. Let them test, let them get data, and then you have Daytona 500 qualifying. I mean, what part of that scenario is stupid? None. the idea of having a race, not even at a racetrack, mind you, but at a converted football stadium, instead of testing out your brand new equipment at a track where you can get legitimate data, especially for the small time teams that don't have the resources as your Hendricks or your Roushes or your Penske's or your Joe Gibbs, that makes no sense. And if anything, you're screwing over some of the smaller teams because, again, they said it's going to be invitational. But when you have a completely new, like everything's different, why have the race at a football stadium in California where you could have it at the track you're going to be racing at Daytona and get some data? Again, this happened with the Gen 5 car, the car of tomorrow. This happened with the Gen 6 car. I have a feeling it's going to happen with this car. There's going to be something, I don't know what, that the designers missed and that either went unnoticed or wasn't an issue in testing that's going to be an issue in race conditions. You can have all of the tests done you want. You're not going to learn any real data unless you have 40 cars going at the same time. That's just the way it is. So have the Clash. Have the Clash at Daytona. Let the teams test. Get as much data and get as much feeling for the car. Maybe you might find a problem. It's possible. No design is perfect, but you're going to have to sort through the details to find problems. But no, it puts an unnecessary strain on the teams because instead of just, driving to Daytona and just being there for a few weeks, you got to drive to and from Southern California from North Carolina. It's probably an even worse drive than I'm thinking. You got to have all the teams fly down there and back. You've got basically an untested track that you're not really going to be able to test until you actually get there, which again makes no sense, especially with brand new cars. It's just you're trying something that wasn't thoroughly thought through. Sometimes it may work, a lot of times it won't. And again, I understand that you have to keep the schedule fresh and the sport fresh. But there gets to be a point where you're just making changes for no other reason than to make changes. Having worked in retail, I refer to it as new manager syndrome because this has happened every single time a new manager or a store director gets transferred in. They have to make changes just to show that they're doing something. Now, common sense would dictate that you would analyze everything and then see, okay, this is not working, we're going to change this. This is working, we're going to leave it alone. But no, that isn't how it works. The minute they get in, they have to start changing everything to prove that they're having an effort. And I know that this is in more than just retail, so that's just the way it is. And I say this because some of the changes that are being made aren't bad changes. I like the idea of having a race on dirt. I think NASCAR was long overdue for that. I like Chicagoland not being on the schedule anymore. As much as I love Chicago, the track is just awful. It was never a good track to begin with. I'm glad it's off the schedule. But then there are changes that just perplex me. Like, why did we take the Indy Oval off the schedule this year? Why did we do that? I mean, granted, after people say, after the 2008 Brickyard, blah, 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 blah. That was, 13 years ago? 13, 14 years ago? I'm trying to understand why we took it off. And I get that the point I was just trying to make was, well, After the 2008 Brickyard 400, fan attendance dropped and blah, 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 blah. After 2008, the Brickyard 400 was actually pretty decent. I mean, it wasn't as great as it was, but it was still decent. It was a decent enough race. And then with the advent of the new road courses, which again is something that fans have been wanting. I'm not a road course guy, but I understand why fans like road course racing. And I think NASCAR is overdue to have more road courses put on the schedule. I just don't think that we should just make massive changes every year. Just sort of see what works and see what doesn't. See how the fans react. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, change it. But don't just come in and just rewrite everything every few years just because. I do need to think you need to keep the sport fresh. But I think also one of the things that NASCAR hasn't been doing. I mean, they've been making changes to the cars, the schedules, the all-star races, blah, blah, blah. Something that they have not been able to do in I'd say the last, 10 years was building superstars. I mean, granted, you've got guys like Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, but they are not on the superstar level that guys like Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt and Dale Jarrett were. I mean, even Dale Jr. Yeah, he wasn't the greatest driver in the world, but he sold merch. He was popular. You could put his number and name on anything and fans would buy it. Dale Jr. brand pooper scoopers. I'm willing to bet that that's the night. It's almost as bad as Hulk Hogan, if you think about it. But again, we don't really have, outside of maybe one guy, no real, true superstar that has crossed over from NASCAR to popular culture. You haven't had one since, Jeff Gordon or Dale Jr. Build some new superstars. People are saying that fans aren't caring as much about NASCAR. Well, give us a reason to care. Give us some superstars. That's another thing about giving us a reason to care. Formula One. They're upset that they're not popular in the U.S., yet the U.S. has no reason to care about them. Give us a reason to care. What am I saying that's so bad? We don't have a reason to care. Give us a reason to care. Same thing with Formula E. Same thing with I forgot the name, the endurance car championships. Just we don't have a reason to care. Just give us reasons to care. That's all we're asking. I'm not going to care about a racing series if I don't have a reason to. Yeah. So I've gone on long enough about this. I think you're tired of listening to me. So I'm going to call it here. I'll be back starting in 2022 this will be weekly. I might do a regular Friday feature every once in a while, but for the most part, this is going to replace Friday features. It's easier for me to do. I've got a lot of stuff I'm working on, so I'll see you in 2021. I'm Dave Firestone. Have a good day.